First and foremost, I don't sound the best, I don't look the best, I don't feel the best today. I went to a hockey tournament on the weekend, and if you are a hockey parent, you know that you're coming home from that sick. So who knows what I got this time, but I'm not feeling too hot today. That doesn't stop the news though. So right now, everybody is watching June 4th, the next Bank of Canada rate announcement. And if you just read headlines, you think a cut is almost guaranteed, especially after CPI came out today and we were told it's 1.7%. Inflation in April was 1.7%. Fuel prices alone fell 18.1% thanks to OPEC plus oversupply and the rollback of the carbon tax. Now, I had spoken about that at length, and prior to the OPEC plus cut, the tariffs were doing quite a number. The fear around the tariffs, all of that, were doing quite a number on the April futures. So we all knew that this was going to happen where fuel prices are concerned. So that part, it makes it look like the economic picture is softening and like really, really quickly. But the thing is, the Bank of Canada doesn't set rates based on that headline number that makes all of the news, all of the tickers, everything. They actually focus on three core inflation measures: CPI-common, which came in at 2.5%. CPI-median sitting at 3.2%, and CPI-trim that's still high at 3.1%. Those different numbers, they all factor out the most drastic ends of the spectrum. So things like gasoline and so on don't hold the same weight. Headline CPI is more about what you may be seeing, the average person may be seeing, but it isn't what the Bank of Canada bases it on. So with each of those being well above the 2% target, questions have to be made as to whether or not they are going to cut on June 4th or if they will wait until the next meeting, because now, I do believe that they will cut because of the job numbers. But this is a good reason if they want to hold the rate steady, because we could have inflation going up again. Now, I don't think that we will, but housing inflation, the prices of houses could skyrocket is the fear if they cut too soon. But on the other side of the spectrum is what we're seeing: repossessions, elevated credit card balances, mortgage renewals that are financially devastating for families who bought homes in 2020, 2021. So it's quite the balancing act they're under right now. And the BOC is completely cornered. The government is not helping them any. Mark Carney just returned from Italy after a meeting with Prime Minister Meloni, and the official readout spoke of strengthening energy ties. But he returned home with no LNG deal, no structural energy solution, and no deliverables. It was just optics ahead of the Pope's Mass. Now, on the topic of Carney has decided to delay the federal budget until the fall. Now, he's saying he doesn't have time to get it done, but here's what I think the reason is. He's waiting for the final seat recounts to be resolved in the courts, hoping that the Liberals can nudge their total from 170 to 171 and pass the budget with a technical majority. This has nothing to do with fiscal strategy, it's political timing. And where politics are concerned, let's talk about his cabinet for a minute. It's built for obedience. Champagne is now finance minister with no economic credentials because he isn't meant to be a counterweight and a voice in the room to go against Carney. He's meant to be an amplifier. His job isn't to balance the books or push back on fiscal drift. It's to sell it. He's loyal, he's presentable, and unlikely to challenge the Prime Minister's office because he doesn't have enough knowledge about economics to challenge him. So he is perfect for this government and a problem for Canadians in this position, because a strong government would have somebody who works as a second set of eyes, a devil's advocate. You know, we don't necessarily want a Paul Martin, but we need somebody who is willing to say, no, we can't do this. And with Carney having the economic credentials that he has, the argument has been, well, he doesn't need a finance minister with an economic background, or who knows what's going on. But that is a disservice to us, all of us, as Canadians, in my opinion. Then there's Evan Solomon, who I was a huge fan of as a journalist, and I'm quite sad to see that he's become a Liberal, because he was an amazing journalist. And now he is the Minister of Artificial Intelligence and Digital Innovation. I don't think his appointment is about technology. It's about trust. Canadians have spent decades watching him explain politics with polish and authority, and quite frankly, until he ran for the Liberals, he was very apolitical. He was hard on everybody, and he did a fantastic job at that. That built a lot of trust within Canadians. And now he's the public face of a ministry designed to support Bill C-63, a bill that proposes peace bonds for online speech and life-altering penalties for so-called digital harm. Solomon's role is to lend credibility to a policy Canadians would otherwise push back on. He's not writing the legislation. He's just meant to sell it to us. His presence gives people just enough comfort to not ask deeper questions. Meanwhile, inflation is falling on paper, but nothing else about this moment suggests stability. You have a central bank forced to stall, a government that padded pensions and cut taxes, as we discussed in part 3, I'll link it below, without a revenue plan, and a prime minister delaying a budget so he can pass it with one extra seat. So what happens now? If the Bank of Canada cuts rates in June and inflation rebounds, Carney will wear the blame, not just politically, but economically. If they hold and more families get squeezed by mortgage renewals and credit defaults, he still owns the fallout, because the federal government hasn't offered any meaningful support to offset that pain. This isn't a coordinated plan, it's a gamble. One built on the hope that short-term messaging can outpace long-term consequences. And Canadians, we're the ones left at balancing it. I hope you have a wonderful week. I'll be back on Friday with an in-depth part 4.